All right, welcome everyone to the Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 Tumwater City Council work session. And I believe that we still waiting for Joan Cathy to join us. So anyway, everyone's here except for Councilmember Cathy. So she should be joining us soon. So with that, Troy, I'm going to hand it over to you to start our mini Finance 201.
Okay, thank you. And let me share my screen here. Hopefully you're seeing my screen and in presentation mode. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Great to be here tonight to talk about municipal finance, one of my favorite topics. And we're going to kind of jump right in. And so just by way of background, we're going to have 4 of these municipal finance sessions. These are not asks for any action on the council's part. These are just educational. And this is kind of leading up to the mayor's proposed budget. So we're going to do one on revenues, which is tonight. We'll have one for expenditures, one for debt, and one for budget. And then we'll jump into budget. And we'll have 3 work sessions related to budget and a couple public hearings before we ask for adoption of the budget in December. So, we've got some new or new-ish council members, and we don't always talk about what the finance department does. So we're going to start these sessions off with this. You'll only see this tonight, and the next sessions, I won't bore you with what the finance department does, because I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. So just kind of the structure of the finance department right now. I oversee finance, IT, and the ERP system, but tonight we'll be focusing only on finance. And what does finance do? Basically, if it touches money, it touches finance at some point. There's an interface. And so we do all the day-to-day things like accounts payable. As part of that, we audit every single payment made to make sure it's coded to the right accounts, to make sure it's allowable and all those good things. We administer the purchase card program, advanced travel, utility billing, and all these. We take all the money in, send all the money out, that's kind of the day-to-day, everyday things that we do. At a higher level, we do things like budget and prepare financial statements. And of course, budget is one bullet in this presentation, but as you know, it's a 9-month process that's very involved and takes a lot of work and a lot of staff time. So these are the big higher level things we do that we don't do every day, but we spend a lot of time on them, preparing the annual report, the annual financial statements, the ERP, which is touching every area of finance. We get audits not only from the state auditor's office, but also from other regulatory agencies. Sometimes we issue debt, not for a while, but coming up. We invest money, we track assets, we do project accounting, internal controls, and all that good stuff. And in my role as your finance director, I wear a lot of hats. Being a smaller city, we don't have individual people to do all the different things. And so I'm the chief financial officer, the treasurer, the internal control officer, a financial advisor, a leader, and a member of the management team. And some of the specific things that I do is working on budget, doing forecasts, administering grants lately because we don't have anyone else to do them. Some of them, not all. Implement GASB's. GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and they basically write rules for accounting and financial reporting that we have to follow. So they make our job harder and harder every single year. And of course, the ERP, which we've mentioned, and investments, financials, and assisting other departments is a big part of the job too, just day-to-day stuff. So what guides our work in the finance department? We follow several codes of ethics. There's ethics written into city policy that we follow. Yes, Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, Troy. How many people are on your team?
We have 12, including myself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for your question. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, feel free to raise your hand or chime in anytime. I can take questions as we go. Okay, so ethics and city policy. I'm a member, and a few of us are, of the Government Finance Officers Association, which is a national organization that promotes best practices and gives guidance to finance folks. The initials behind my name stand for Certified Fraud Examiner. So as part of that, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners has its own code of ethics. And then we also follow state ethics rules. We follow professional accounting standards. I mentioned, no, I didn't mention that. Yes, I mentioned GASB already. And then the GASB pronouncements become part of GAAP accounting, which is full accrual accounting. And we follow all those standards, as well as federal and state laws and guidance from the state auditor's office. And of course, council goals and priorities drive our work. Okay, so that's all for the finance department for tonight. And we'll jump into the revenue side of things. And so one big distinction when it comes to revenue is the different fund types. And we have a lot of funds here at the city, but the most of the activity occurs either in the general fund or in the business type funds, which is the utilities and also golf. So general fund is your essential public services like police, fire, streets, parks, community development, and then of course all the support systems like legal and HR and finance and IT. And then I mentioned business type funds being water, sewer, storm, and golf. And so the revenues are different based on those fund types. So general fund, most of the revenue comes from taxes, different types, and we'll get into these a little bit later in more detail. We also get some grants occasionally, and then Medic One is considered an intergovernmental, but it's a tax revenue. And then on the business type funds, basically it's rates, fees for service and things like that are our main sources of revenue. Yes, Councilmember Dolhoff.
Thank you, Troy. Just a quick question on the impervious surface water. Is that stormwater runoff?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I almost put storm there, but I was trying not to use too many words. Yes, that's how stormwater fees are calculated, is by the impervious surface area on top of a small base fee. So basically for the three utilities, it's fees for the services we provide, rates, if you will, and then and then also some grants sometimes for different projects, and then golf, things like green fees and car rentals and merchandise sales. So going to the general fund, and I put challenges here, and this is a little nuanced because we're talking about revenues tonight. But these are kind of expense type things, but they're so tightly wound. I just wanted to talk about it for a second. So, of course, one of the challenges with taxes is it's not super popular to raise people's taxes, right? And so we can't just go ask for, well, I mean, we can go ask for as much money as we want. Probably not the smartest move politically to do. So we have to be careful and thoughtful about things like that. And then when it comes to capital projects and things like that, especially, we've got inflation, as you know, has been through the roof the last couple of years, and that impacts wages and benefits and materials and all those things. And so the reason I bring that up is because the high inflation, even though that hits us on the expense side, it puts strain on our revenues. And so that's why that's included here. And we'll go through a similar one with utilities in a minute. So this is your general fund revenue broken down by category. And as you can see, this is basically taxes and fees. Property tax making up the biggest portion, followed by sales tax and B&O tax. That intergovernmental contracts and grants, that's grants, that's the Medic One and things like that. And then charges for services like building permits and other types of things like that. And this is pretty typical for most cities. You can have some small variations, but not humongous generally. Okay, and then we, of course, need to talk about the structural deficit. And in the past, we've talked about the financial cliff, and we're we're going to reframe that and not talk about it in such scary terms. And there'll be a couple slides coming up to explain why. But so, you know, we do have the structural deficit with the cap on the property tax at 1%. Where we're at right now gives us about $100,000 a year. But our expenses go up in the general fund by about 1.1 million a year. And so that just doesn't keep pace. You probably all heard about the time value of money when it comes to investment interest and things like that. There's a similar phenomenon with revenues, and we'll show that right here. So this graph is made up. This is not real data. It could be. This is kind of a scenario. And so the blue line at the bottom is the 1% property tax. And this starts back in 2001 when that property tax cap went into effect. The orange line is if we back up a step. Cities used to be able to charge up to 6% increases per year under state law if they wanted to. And of course, they said, oh, it needs to be justified and things like that. So this is just a scenario like, what if it was 1%? What if it was 3%? And what if it was 6% every single year? So that shows you, the blue line where we actually are with that cap, and versus where we could have been if it was a 3% or a 6%. And that gap widens over time because the revenue you charged last year is now your new baseline, and now you're increasing on top of that. So that's where the time value of money comes in for this part. Good news for us, and this is why we talk about the structural deficit and why we don't go off the cliff. Or at least this is a part of it. So this is the same graph overlaid with our actual property tax of one increase of 1% plus the new construction component. So you can see by this, so that yellow line is actual numbers for the city of Tumwater until you get to 2024, 2025, and then it's projected out based on the trend. And so you can see that fluctuates from year to year sometimes. You see about 2008, 2009 with the Great Recession, how that went down pretty sharply, bounced back up. Yes, Councilmember Swarthout.
Yeah, I was just watching the news. It looks like Gig Harbor, they have a proposition where they're voting to raise their property tax to I think it's like 1.10%, but they have to vote on that. It's going to the citizens, it looks like. So I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, so I haven't heard of their specific situation, but it sounds like it's probably a levy lid lift. And so that is an option for cities. We could in fact we did that, but it was quite a number of years ago, 2011 I want to say, when we went to the voters and we did a public safety levy lid lift. And so that money gets set aside specifically for police and fire. And so that is an option in the future. If we have a need for it, we can go to the voters and ask them to approve a levy lid lift from the property tax. Okay, so anyway, this is basically how we've been avoiding the cliff. And so we're going to look at this as less of a cliff and more of a performance measure. We track this all the time throughout the year, not just every time we budget. So we're always keeping an eye on our sales tax, on our property tax, making sure everything looks like we think it should. And certainly if we noticed any downward trends, we would be letting you know. And so I already kind of went into this one just a little bit. So how do we keep up growth? Basic is one way. So the sales tax from new construction. So we talked about the property tax increase from new construction. We also get a portion of sales tax from new construction on all the building materials and things like that. And that tends to lag behind because when a contractor is building something, they're kind of tax exempt until it gets to the end and they've got a product that they sell or do whatever with, and that's when we get the sales tax portion. In addition to the sales tax on new construction, we also have retail sales tax, of course, from businesses. And one thing that really helped us a ton during the pandemic was the destination-based sales tax. So that comes from online shopping and anything delivered within the city of Tumwater. The city of Tumwater gets that sales tax. So that makes a huge difference for us. Okay, so often we hear, and I'm sure you all hear it even more than I do. Why are my taxes going up so much? If there's a 1% limit on my property taxes, why do they go up so high? And there's a lot of different reasons, and it's really hard to explain. But we, in essence, we're not the only ones with a slice of this pie. We've got, we've got schools, which are actually the biggest piece, and I'll show you a chart for that in a second. But they can run various levies, maintenance and operation levies, special technology levels. They can issue bonds that'll be repaid through that revenue, and so that's a big component. The state, the county, other junior taxing districts like the Port, Medic One, they all have a share, and they can all do other things that the city can or in some cases can't do. And so here's a visual of that. And so you can see schools get, for every property tax dollar, schools get 39 cents of that. The state's 23%, we're at 19, and then down from there. So we're third in line for property tax dollars. And now we're going to shift over to utilities a little bit, and we get the same kind of questions. Why are my rates so high? So this goes to a couple of things. Again, like I mentioned earlier, inflation, the cost of capital projects, wages for staff, as well as state regulations and requirements. We need to maintain the system. We need to have enough money to do repair, maintenance, and plan for capital projects as well. And we are lower than our neighbors when it comes to utility rates. And I know we're doing a survey right now of utility rates. Dan's group is, and so we'll have more actual data for that coming up pretty soon. But here is a comparison between us and Lacey and Olympia, where we're at. So we are quite a bit below our neighbors in that. Yes, Councilmember Kathy. I think you're muted.
I got muted because I've been talking too much today. If you could go back to the previous slide, it'd be great. Under capital projects costs, are these only projects, capital projects that are related to utilities?
Yes, for this particular slide, it is. All of our capital projects have gone way up in cost, whether it be the roundabout or utility projects. But yes, the cost of all. In fact, you've probably driven over Israel Road on your way into City Hall recently and noticed how torn up the road is, and they've been working on it since summertime. That part wasn't actually a road project; it was a water main replacement project. And when it's going by memory here, but when that project was first kind of conceived and planned many years ago, they were expecting it, I think, to cost around $800,000. And when it finally got to the point where it went out for bid, it was $4 million. And so that's the kind of increases we've been seeing in all of our capital projects, whether it's roads or utilities.
So this under the utilities capital projects, is that not where we are collecting money to do other capital projects with?
Yes.
And that's why people's water bill went up, for example?
That's one of the reasons, yes. Inflation overall, capital projects is one big part of that, especially the last couple of years. But yes, the cost of the capital projects, the cost of putting in new infrastructure or replacing old infrastructure has gone up a lot, and that does impact the rates because the point again, this kind of gets to the expense side of things, but again, these expenses, the only way the utilities have to pay these expenses is through the rates. And so that's why the rates have to go up to keep up with these rising costs.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you. Okay, and so this is similar to the slide we had for the general fund portion of this. Again, challenges, and we've kind of talked about these already, but you know, just the ever increasing costs with the super high inflation, wages, materials, and all this kind of stuff. Even though those are expense things, it directly affects the utility rates and therefore the utility revenues. So that's why that's included here. And that went quicker than I thought, and I'm already to the end of questions.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Kathy.
Thank you. So how long can cities keep doing this and putting on the water customers and you know, all the utility rates things, keep having them go up, up, up? It seems like it's I mean, those taxes and sales taxes, they just hit everybody. And it's really hard, which we know from some of our water shut off things and things like that. But just, I guess I'm just thinking broadly or historically in your knowledge of city business and so forth. Is there just an unlimited ability for cities to keep raising utility rates?
Not really. I mean, there's not a legal limit, you know. So we have the 1% property tax limit that says you can only raise it this much. We don't have that with utilities, but I think, you know, public outcry and you know, elected officials might be voted out of office if they're going too high. I can share with you one thing that I experienced when I used to work at the state auditor's office, and I would be out auditing counties and cities and small towns and things like that. And there were a few back in probably 2008, 2010, that kind of range, where the elected officials didn't want to raise rates. They kind of looked at that as a tax. And so some of them kind of ran on a platform of like, well, I'm not going to raise your taxes. I'm not going to raise your rates. Well, some of these cities went 15, 20 years without raising utility rates. And even though inflation was low back then, just you know, you've got to plan ahead for the maintenance costs and the upgrades, and these were towns that weren't growing, so it's not that they had to add new infrastructure, but you know, when you have pipes in the ground that are getting to be 40, 50 years old, those are going to need to be replaced at some point. And if they start failing, you end up with sanitary problems with the water. And so we actually saw a few small towns where the county ended up taking over their water system because they, you know, you get into this pinch where if you're not keeping up with inflation and maintenance, you basically run out of money to do things. And if you run out of money and you go to a bank or some kind of governmental lender to borrow money, no one wants to give you money because they don't have assurance that you can repay the loan. And so it puts them in a really hard spot. And so it kind of forces you into one or two corners. One is the county takes over your system, and then they charge whatever they need to run it and make a profit. Or the other is you have to do a special assessment on all of your ratepayers, which means instead of like a 3 or a 4% increase every year, you're all of a sudden you're looking at like 20-25% increases because you need to raise some capital. You need to raise money to start working on your system. Mm-hmm. So it gets kind of sad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that people do not understand, speaking of, you know, 2007, 8, I ran on not raising the rates on water. And part of that was driven by seniors who, you know, were talking to me about how the utility rates keep going up. Well, some of those seniors have been driven out of their homes, but I don't think that people understand that we're raising those rates and they're paying for things other than their water, other than their utility. their utility doesn't cost that much, but taxes have been put on that for other reasons. Then people don't understand that. And so, not that you want to add that to something for explaining, but I think that when we need to be conscious of the fact that when people talk about their water bill going up, or what, you know, their stormwater or whatever it is that we have control of, that we're doing other things also with that money. I think that's what they don't know. or
Yeah.
under-
Yeah, and we could certainly work on, help with messaging for that, especially when we get a new communications person, if council members would like points to, have some things in your back pocket that could help explain that. Or they could always get in touch with me or with Dan Smith, and we can help explain those kind of things. Or maybe we put something on the website. Communication can always be better. And these kind of things aren't always easy to understand as well.
Yeah, and maybe no one else has had that issue or had that conversation with someone, but I just think it's something good for us as part of the communication team to know what it is.
Yeah, and we do also have programs to help people. We have our Lifeline program, which if it's disabled or low income senior citizens, they qualify for half off.
Yep.
That's something we try to message out frequently, because we want to make sure everyone that qualifies for it accesses it.
Yeah, people are very grateful for that.
Yeah, Lisa,
Thanks, Troy.
you bet. Lisa, oh, there you are. Moved around on the screen on. I can't hear you.
Oh,
I
you
didn't-
can?
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So I just wanted to jump in and provide a little bit of first my thoughts on the questions that you just answered, Councilmember Kathy, or asked. One, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that the primary difference between the business funds and the general fund is that the business funds, the utility funds, they are rate supported. So whatever we charge for rates has to support the system. So the needs of the system drive the costs and of the rate structure. So when we get to a point where the rates are becoming unaffordable, then that's the point in time at which the council begins to make decisions about level of service. So if we're providing a certain level of service and the community expects to, and we have regulations that somewhat dictate that. But if we're providing a certain level of service and we're getting to the point where the rate system can't support that level of service, then there are really difficult policy level decisions that have to get made by the council in terms of what do we do with that level of service. We have to meet our minimums. We have to follow state regulations, particularly when you're talking about public health and safety, water systems and sewer systems and those types of things. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is that there are things that could dictate policy changes that could dictate the level of service that we're providing, that could potentially lower the costs and therefore lower the rates and fees. So just a perspective that, when it comes time, this is why we need you to set for us your priorities from a policy level so that we can understand what kinds of choices you all want to make in terms of what we offer as a city to our citizenry based on the revenue that we can generate and the costs of providing the services that you want to provide to the community.
Councilmember Dolcott?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess adding to that, thank you, Lisa and Troy. The example that I have is the Deschutes estuary. How we're going to pay for that is coming out of the stormwater. So we raised the rates of stormwater for the Deschutes estuary, which I don't think a lot of people understand, or maybe it wasn't in the notice or when it was going up, right? That's an example of how we're contributing to something else and we're using this other fund to pay for it. That's an opportunity to explain well, yes, this is important as well. We've decided to do this and this is the avenue to do it. So that's just the most recent example of it's not just the level of service, it's also to pay for the Deschutes estuary.
Any other questions? Great, thank you.
Yes, one more question.
Okay,
So,
Councilmember Jefferson.
Troy, when are we gonna see that slide that we should be concerned about? You said don't panic about it. Is that gonna be the next briefing?
No, that was this briefing. So we decided that slide's really really scary, and so that's where I mentioned we want to reframe that a little bit and look at it more as a performance measure rather than this visual that we're going to drop off a cliff, because I've only been here for 3 years, but I'm guessing we've been probably showing a similar slide for 10 or 12 or more years. And it's so we just want to, but we still haven't fallen off the cliff. And so rather than keep bringing that back and kind of scaring everybody every time, we're definitely going to watch it. Now we can definitely provide, updated graphs and data and things like that, but we just want to try to do it in a little more positive light.
Okay, one last question. So when we look at a major expense like body cameras, what is the process? How do we go about raising these funds? Is it a levy? Is it because we need those? So talk to me about that a little bit.
Sure. And that'll be a pretty big conversation, because there's a lot, as you know, a lot of things that go into that decision. I'm just speculating. One of the we just started to collect the Proposition 1 public safety measure revenue that the county had voted on last November. So that started April 1st. We expect to receive our first payment in June for that. And so, that's projected to be, this Thurston County's projections, not mine, about $940,000 a year to start. And so, we'll probably get half of that this year. And so I think that conversation will be part of the larger budget discussion. I know they'll be going to the Public Health and Safety Committee and also to council, because this is it's a really big decision and a lot of things involved. And the $940,000 probably isn't going to be enough to cover it. It'll help cover a good chunk, but it's more than just body cameras. It's staff it's storage for all the videos. It's staff to respond to public records requests. It's probably a supervisor to supervise the staff that are so it's a big thing.
Okay.
And that'll be coming back to council a lot, I imagine.
Thanks, Troy. Thank you.
Sure.
Good briefing.
Councilmember Alhauser, I saw you were unmuted a minute ago. Are you good? Okay.
All right, any other questions? Great, thank you, Troy. And we will be having several more sessions with you coming in the next few work sessions. So thank you. All right, next item is a service provider agreement with Haley and Aldrich for the integrated planning grant for the DOT Capitol Boulevard property, and Mike Matlock will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I actually have two service provider agreements tonight. We'll take them in turn because they are two different sources of money. One's state and one's federal. So we'll do the state DOE one first. This is the integrated planning grant, as the mayor said, for environmental assessment work, primarily on the now vacant headquarters, former headquarters station for the regional WASDOT facility on Capitol Boulevard, the old Art Deco building and the associated buildings with that. That's been vacant now for a couple of years, and this is identified even before it was vacant as a really important part of the Capitol Boulevard corridor plan and its redevelopment, because it's the largest site for a kind of a brownfields redevelopment. So most of the properties on Capitol Boulevard are very small in nature. It makes it harder to aggregate things to do kind of a splashy development on a signature street like this. So this is a good opportunity for us. So this grant is a $200,000 grant, and it would provide funds to do that assessment work. So we would get to phase 2 environmental assessments, so we'd know what contaminants are there, what their extent is, and start to put together a redevelopment plan based on that for any cleanup if that's necessary. So a successful outcome would have a really important ramifications for the city in a very good way. The plan's vision talks about 1 to 5 buildings, both residential and retail for that site, public plaza, and small public park. The idea is that the city would ultimately purchase this property from the state and then solicit a developer and probably sell the property to the developer, but it would give the city some control over how that development happens. And what we've talked about in the plan is having 1/3 of that be for affordable housing, 1/3 for market rate housing, and 1/3 for commercial and public use. And as I said, redevelopment of this site would really catalyze that broader vision that the council adopted through the Capitol Boulevard Corridor Plan. There's no match requirement for this grant. An RFQ was published. We actually did one RFQ for both this grant and the one I'm going to talk about next in your next agenda item. And we solicited proposals and we got 6 proposals, and we had a staff committee that ranked those proposals. And at the end, we came out with hiring Haley and Aldrich. They're an experienced environmental assessment firm to do this work for us. And staff are simply asking the council to put this service provider agreement with Haley and Aldrich on the May 7th council consent calendar in order to authorize the mayor to sign the service provider agreement and get this work underway. It's a 2-year grant period on this one. And that's, with that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions? Councilmember Kathy.
Thanks, Mike, for that. The question, I just wonder how does it work when we purchase the property, then we sell it to a developer? Does it complicate what it is that we want to have happen on the property?
No, it actually makes it easier for us to have control. If we were only to do this work and then have a private developer purchase the property, we wouldn't have any input, for example, on having affordable housing. They would just need to do whatever the zoning allows for that site. So they wouldn't necessarily need to have that component unless they wish to. So doing it in this manner gives the city more control over that kind of outcome.
To sell it to a developer with these requests? In other words, they can't purchase it unless they do what we want done on the property?
Yes, exactly.
Oh. So they just become our carpenters, huh?
Well, it's a little more than that. It's a partnership.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you have to get the right developer to do that.
Right.
Which we talk about in all of our development. Well, thanks. I wasn't sure how that worked. Thank you.
Councilmember Dalha.
Thanks, Mayor. Mike, you know, there is, with regarding to like our community center that we have to build, and there's going to be like a stakeholder group of looking at parcels. Is there an opportunity to have that community center on that parcel for that 1/3? Is that something to be evaluated as a potential, or no? Is that parcel not on the list?
You know, I don't recall if that is on the list or not. Maybe Lisa may. Oh, Chuck is here. Chuck would know.
Yeah.
Here I am. Yes, it is. It is on the list. One of the 4 sites that we're going to be evaluating.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so is there an agreement to have this go on the consent agenda for our next city council meeting? Perfect. I don't see anybody opposed to that. All right, so next we'll go, Mike, to the next one, which is a service provider agreement for the Brownfield Assessment EPA grant.
Okay, thank you. This is a $500,000 grant. This is a national competitive grant, and I know we've talked with the council about this before. Austin Ramirez put this together for us, and it's really incredible actually that he was able to secure this grant, because these are highly competitive, and it's It's actually quite rare for an applicant like the city to secure one of these in their first go. So I know Austin's not listening tonight, but a big shout out to him for securing this grant. So this is a community-wide assessment grant from the EPA. It's similar in that this will also be doing assessment work, environmental assessment work to figure out what contaminants are there and what their extent is, and setting the stage for further planning work in the future. It will focus on 2 target areas, and it's different in that respect. It will focus on the brewery district, and it will focus on the capital corridor. So we're talking about the brewery Knoll property and the warehouse properties in the valley. And we'll focus on those 2 for the most part. And also part of that too could also be some work on the WSDOT regional headquarters. They can blend into that too, because it is an assessment that is region wide. There'll be a number of tasks completed under this grant, and be a robust public involvement plan that will include direct involvement with the public and the owners and developers and real estate professionals, and we'll have public workshops to gain input. We'll do a site inventory in both phase 1 and phase 2 and assessments to determine the type and extent of contaminants. And then we'll start talking about what remediation and reuse planning for these targeted sites would look like. I think it's important in regards to this one, when you're talking about a brownfields development of the scale of the old brewery, this is not going to be a one and done project for this grant. This is kind of an early stage of a years long process to get a site like this in shape for redevelopment, but that is definitely the goal here. The city council previously authorized the mayor to sign the agreement with the EPA for the grant, and there is no match requirement. There is one change I'm going to need to make before this comes back to you on your May 7th agenda. The service provider agreement lists $500,000 as the contract with Haley and Aldrich. That's the grant amount. The actual amount to go to Haley and Aldrich was actually should be $476,500. So I need to make that change before it comes back to you on the 7th. Haley and Aldrich is aware of that. And I'd also like to put this on considerations if you would do that rather than consent. The reason being, early on in our grant in this quarter under the work program with the EPA, we need to do a community meeting to kind of explain to the public what's going on with this grant. And that would actually be a great opportunity to have you meet our consultant on the 7th and have them explain this project and what the outcomes are and the timeframes. And that will satisfy that requirement for our first public involvement meeting on this project. It won't be the last and it won't be the most extensive, but it will get this thing kicked off for us. So we looked at the same 6 firms and again selected Haley and Aldrich for this site as well. And there was one other thing I was going to mention about this. I think I need to make one other little change in the service provider agreement too. I want to make an addition in there where Haley and Aldrich will need to give us a monthly status report on what they've done. That'll make it much easier should we get audited in the future for these funds, and also for us to do our quarterly reporting to the EPA and what we're doing here. So again, it's an exciting project. It will be great to get this thing kicked off, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this one as well.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Kathy.
Thanks, Mike. That's exciting. Anytime you give reports on money in instead of money out, you're a hero. So will this grant provide visual things? Are people in the community gonna see something, movement, what's going on or anything like that? Or when will that happen? Because that'll really jolt people awake.
Yeah, there'll be some physical activity out there. To do a phase 2 environmental review, they need to go out and actually drill some holes and dig some holes and do some testing. So there'll be, it won't be like a construction project, I don't imagine, but there'll be some activity that people might notice.
Good. I'd rather answer questions like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this property isn't gonna move forward without knowing what we're dealing with there. Same as the Wasatch property.
Mhm.
I would just add that, these EPA community-wide assessment grants really do require community input, so, we're gonna be required to have a page on our website that's devoted to the project. We're gonna have to have some pretty regular communication. And, even if they aren't yet seeing sort of the physical, any physical construction projects, we're gonna be working really hard to make sure that we're keeping people informed. And, we will work really hard, right up front with Haley and Aldrich to make sure that you all have adequate information and talking points that you can speak intelligently to what's going on. So when people ask you questions about what's happening, you have answers for them. So stay
Yes,
tuned. on that
that's a
front.
great point about the website. Thank you, Lisa. We really need to stand up a portion of our website specifically for brownfields this quarter. So that's going to be coming soon. And that'll be an easy way for all of us when we're talking with folks in the community. We can talk about a little bit and then say, oh, by the way, look at our website. We've got some information there, and that will expand as we go along and add things to it as the project goes along. A longer time frame on this one. This is a 4-year grant.
Councilmember Dolhoff, did you have a question?
This comment is slightly unjust, but I'm just wondering, like, it'd be interesting if police track when they do their monthly reports, if any calls of suspicious activity at those properties. I could just see people, doing their work and people seeing and just calling and say, someone's there, someone's there. So just slightly unjust, but would be interested to see if we do get calls like that. Hey, someone's there, what's going on? And what a great avenue then to direct them to the webpage or the information.
Any other questions? Great, thank you. And that will be going on council considerations at our next council meeting. All right, so now we're back to Troy for ordinance number 2024-002, which is budget amendment number 2. So Troy, go ahead.
Thank you. Share this, put it in presentation mode. Okay, should be good to go now. Okay, well, thank you for having me yet again. And I guess Mike gets to be the hero for bringing in money, and I get to be the goat for spending it. But maybe goat means greatest of all time. We'll see. Anyway, so budget amendment number 2. So you'll recall we had our first biennial budget amendment last November. This is the second one. It's much smaller. And I always like to start with why do we need to do this? And so there's a few reasons. Our new system that we're still in the process of implementing, the portion we went live with, the financials, includes some really nice budget control features. And so basically if a department, they're going along doing their thing and spending money and they run out of budget, it gives them a hard stop and they can't spend any more money. So it's has caused a little frustration and surprise at times. But it's a good feature overall, and we just need to work through a few things. And so we'll go through an example. One of those is lot fees. And this isn't anything departments have done wrong. I want to be clear on that. It's just that there are some things we haven't budgeted super well for in the past that we're going to have to do better going forward. And so that's the biggest part of this this amendment. Also some inflationary issues that we'll talk about and some miscellaneous stuff, a really cool grant that you've probably already heard of. And then we'll spend a little bit of time on wage compression as well. So some of the details, I mentioned the lot revenues. And so as part of the sewer utility, we collect fees specifically for lot. Lot tells us how much to collect, we collect them, and then we send the money to lot. That's basically, it's an in and out. It zeroes out for us in the end. But as accountants, we need to account for all the money coming in and all the money going out. And so we only budgeted $3.5 million or so for the lot expenditures. And in reality, it's more like 7 million. And so in the past, we just did that and it was no big deal because the system didn't make us do it any different. Now with these new budget controls in place, we just have to do a better job of budgeting. And so we will do that. And so this is a big dollar increase, but it's, again, it's a wash in the end. Revenues equal expenditures. So it's really no extra money to the city. And then we have a couple of, in the utility funds, we have a couple of electric vehicle upgrades, which is nice. A van and a truck that, as with most things these days, like we've talked about, cost more than we originally planned for. And then the remodel at South Puget Sound for the water folks is a little more than they had planned. I think this is mostly furnishings and furniture and things like that that are putting them over budget on that. And then they'd like to hire some interns, which weren't included in the original budget. So now we're going to move on to some wage compression issues. So this budget includes a pretty small amount of money to help us deal with some of the most severe wage compression that we have in the city. You'll recall at the council retreat when the directors were there, we had stations where everybody went around, and Michelle and I talked about a salary study that was going on. And so that salary study was basically looking at a few things caused by compression, and where are we at with our comparable cities and our neighbors. And so this is data from the year 2000 going forward to now. And you can see those top two lines, fire and police. And then the third one, the yellow one, is Teamsters, and the blue one at the bottom is the non-rep group. And so basically the non-reps have, because they're not negotiating for their salaries, have been getting left behind a little bit by the unions. And we would like to make that situation better. And so we've got another visual. So this one is basically if we hired one person in each of those employee units in, say, 1999, making $50,000 a year, and then the COLA that each group got going forward from there to now, this is what they would be making. And so fire would be that. Then this is, no promotions. Also doesn't include some of the other perks like education incentives and things like that, just straight up COLAs. So fire would be at 110, police would be at 108, Teamsters would be at 94,000, and non-reps would be at 86,000. And just one more visual, basically the same thing, but this one with some percentages. I just wanted to show some different views because people, prefer different visuals. So since same data since 1999, that those employees, if they all started at $50,000 at the same time, police have seen 118% wage growth, fire 121, Teamsters 89, and non-rep 72. So that's, again, a pretty small amount for this amendment. This involves 6 people. And so so the problem that we're trying to solve here is some of the non-rep people, say in fire and police, are management positions, chief, assistant chief, things like that. And so you've got the non-rep folks coming up behind them, making more and more money. But since the management folks are non-represented, they're not getting the same COLAs. So they're in the blue group, just like everybody else, just like the rest of the non-reps. And so this is to try to ease some of that compression as part of the overall larger budget picture for next biennium. Our goal is to try to make this situation better with all of the non-represented staff. And that's a much more in-depth and detailed study that's going on right now. But for this amendment, about $53,000 to the general fund and just a few $1,000s for the utilities. Inflation things, the fire kitchen remodel that's been going on, they need about $35,000 more to finish that. The City Hall sign The timing is good for this because we got the new logo and everything. But I remember 2 or 3 years back, I think I just started working for the city. And came to work one morning and the sun was hitting the sign just right, and I could see that the wood was rotting on the bottom of the sign. And so I said something to Chuck and John, and Chuck said something like, "Holy cow, that's a $6,000 sign." But now it's a $24,000 sign. So, Councilmember Dolhoff.
Thanks, Troy. For the kitchen remodel, refreshing my memory because it all blends together. Is that for Station 1? And is that where it was like the fume and it's still natural gas hookup?
Yes, I believe that's correct. It is definitely T1, and I think it did have the natural gas. Yes.
Okay, that's just something as we move forward. It's not for Troy, but like when we're banning natural gas moving forward, but yet our fire station has natural gas, that always just seems like a disconnect. And how do we message that to our community, right, of that need? That's just something that parking lot, why does one get it and one doesn't? I think that still needs to be like flushed out a little bit. Not to Troy though. Troy is not for you to do.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So anyway, for this budget amendment, so actually I thought Chuck did a great job of budgeting for this sign. You know, the original one was 6,000 or so. He budgeted 18,000 for, which we thought would be plenty, and we need an additional 6 to complete it. Let's see, police cameras. So this is the Flock camera system. This is still in process. It's not, I don't think it's a done deal quite yet. I know it's gone to Public Health and Safety Committee. They're still working on the service provider agreement with the contractor, but this would be cameras at different points in the city that help detect stolen vehicles and different things like that. So more to come on that, but we wanted to get it in the budget while we were doing this amendment. Yes, Councilmember Dolhoff.
Troy, just to clarify, so technology for police in this budget will be the Flock system, but not allocating anything for the body worn cameras in this budget.
Correct. That's another hand. Okay. Okay, this is another example of just an area where we need to do better at budgeting. This is a special fund for Parks and Rec where they get basically grant reimbursement for some youth programs. And in the past, with the old system, we didn't really budget the revenue and expense. We just knew that we would spend the money and then we would be made whole. And so it just wasn't a big deal. And with the new system, it is a big deal. So we just need to budget that as we should. And then you've probably heard of this. We received a grant from the Department of Commerce for a solar electric vehicle charger at Pioneer Park, which is really exciting. So this will be mostly grant reimbursed, but we do need to budget for the expense because we have to pay the expense first, and then we get reimbursed with the grant. And so total, if we were to look at all funds with this budget amendment, it's actually a net decrease, and that's because of those lot fees. However, it is a little bit more to the general fund. We've got about 323,000 in expenses and 102,000 in revenue from various grant reimbursements. So a net of about 221,000 there. And that's about it. So can take any other questions that you have.
Any questions? So Troy, this is going to come to city council meeting.
Yes, thank you. I meant to add that in. Yes, there's no ask for tonight. We need to do a public hearing for this. And so we'll come back on May 7th and do another brief presentation, hold a public hearing, and then ask for your vote to approve the amendment.
All right, any additional questions? All right, sounds good.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, Mayor's City Administrator report. Administrator Parks.
Sure. I don't have anything super specific. I did want to share one thing with you though, and that is Dan Smith informed us that the Department of Energy through an organization called Forth has created a certification to recognize where employers and workplaces are sort of leading the charge to address climate change and lowering emissions by providing clean transportation options for employees, including electric charging and those types of things. And so we have been designated an EVAL, which stands for Electric Vehicle Adoption Leadership. We've been designated as a certified employer. So we've been listed in the silver category, and I will, in the Friday update, provide you with a link to the program that provides that recognition for the city of Tumwater. So congratulations to our green team and our sustainability coordinator and all of our staff for really looking for those innovative new opportunities to really advance the notion of addressing the real risks of climate change and trying to do our part and walk our talk. So that's what I have for you tonight.
Great. It's always exciting when you go to a meeting and find out we won another award. So it's we've been on a roll lately. So with that, I want to remind everyone that next Tuesday is the 5th Tuesday. So you have a Tuesday off, and then we will have our council meeting on the 7th. So, and that's all I have. So with that, I believe we are adjourned for the evening. And so thank you, everybody, and have a great week.